like a role that they can play, especially on Zoom. So I'll definitely agree with Marcela. Like I kind of speak Spanish for the most part, so they don't necessarily translate for me, but they're kind of just there support like with the chat a lot. And I'll just ask them like if you have any, I'll tell the students like, if you have any questions, you can ask me, and you can ask my TA's name is Marvin, or like you can ask Mr. Marvin, and just to give him also like a presence in the space, like letting the students know like there's more than just me available here for help. And he'll put the questions in Spanish in the chat and respond in Spanish, or he'll jump in and I'm like, there's some certain words, math words that I don't know, and I'm like, Marvin, how do we say that again? Although the kids will translate for me too sometimes, but definitely just utilizing him to help with, yeah, like even that small of a support, like just with the chat, or anything like that.
To echo what everyone else is saying, I think that collaboration
For the vaccine?
yeah, important. And so for Ms. Chavez and I, the comment planning has really worked and has been an effective time that we get to spend aside from the time that we spend with our POC. So just meeting and making it a routine to meet. And during that time, reflecting on the lesson plans that we're doing and also adjusting and modifying as we see, because some of our periods might have a larger load of students who have IEPs. And so reflecting on, hey, this class can do this, but this class needs additional time, has been extremely important in our practice. And it's also been an adjustment period for myself, because while I did it before before I was a co-teacher, it's extremely important to do it for students who have IEPs. And so, for example, right now, our period 6 is a week behind in terms of instruction in comparison to our other classes, because we noted based on the assignments that we've given that they need extra support and extra practice. So it's just modifying and reflecting on what we see our students and what they need also. So it's not just by going like, this is a lesson plan we have and we're going to execute, but also considering how each class in itself is unique and how we can support them so that they may meet the goal that we have for that specific unit or lesson.
Although right now I don't have a co-teacher or any assistance or anything, I have in the past. And what I've learned is preparation, being prepared. Preparation beats skill any day. So if I have the skill, but I'm not prepared for the students that are coming in, then it's not going to work for me to be able to collaborate with the assistants that do come in. However, if I'm prepared in advance and I'm ready and I know what they need and I see what they need prior to the lesson, then when the assistants do come in and they're able to assist, I can know exactly what it is that I'm giving them and what it is that I'm expecting from them and the students. So I say overall preparation.
I appreciate that. And I guess I want to push a little deeper into that. And you mentioned this, many of you mentioned this, but how do you guys use, so every class is different, every student is different. How do you guys use your knowledge of students' language ability and or their IEPs in that process? So how do you dig deeper? What are the successful ways to get that knowledge down at the kid level of language ability or the IEPs to plan your instruction? And I'm going to put that in the chat. That'll be our next round of questions.
I'll go then. I wasn't sure if anybody was gonna jump in. So like we were saying earlier, like, we lesson plan, we make sure we like go over the lessons, look at the activities. We use Desmos. So it's another platform, that the students need to use. And we go through each screen and kind of see what, it's gonna be like, anticipate what might be some of the barriers that is going to prevent the students from engaging. So we try to figure out, what ways to get them involved. And of course, we try to be flexible. We use timers, but we also try to, be flexible depending on what's going on. We all understand that sometimes the kids are not going to get it right away. So we need to sometimes, be flexible with that. And we try to pay attention to the details and make sure that students have access to tools, to any means of communication.
I think
Yes.
that looking at
Go ahead.
Oops, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Garcia.
Yeah, I just want to add, because with math, the IM curriculum, the illustrative math, it's big on using real world problems, and it is language heavy. So where students have to explain their thinking, their process, and we include sentence frames, starters in our Desmos lessons so that the students have the tools to be able to communicate either orally or in writing or visually, what their process is.
For me, I usually utilize student language ability data to group students. So I do a lot of group work, and I use this their language ability to group them. And I think they could help each other if I pair them with people who are well versed in the language. And well, I could show lots of examples of activities that they will make class in doing group work, if there will be time.
I'm gonna kind of bounce off with like what Prada was saying, with being a little understanding and flexible with the timing, because I know sometimes we just feel like we have to get through this lesson, we have to get through these lessons, but and then that, what Christina said in the chat, being intentional. So I always try to consider like the pace of the lesson plan for the day, and just kind of in advance picking a spot in my lesson where I know, like, if we needed a little bit more support in this lesson, let me find a place where I could finish if I'm not able to finish the whole lesson. So kind of knowing in advance, like a spot in the middle of the lesson where you could kind of conclude and wrap things up, just in case like you're not able to get to the end because you needed, students needed some more support during this lesson. So just kind of taking that into consideration while you're planning.
To add to what everybody is saying, I think that learning what the students' needs are and what they're bringing into the classroom is important, because then you get to plan out what scaffolds you need. Scaffolds allow you to provide access. And so when you are planning your lesson, you're able to figure out, okay, so this student or these amount of students will need these scaffolds to be able to reach the goal that you have set. So for example, some students benefit from the sentence starters that you might be giving them, or some students benefit from the outline that you give them while others don't. And so looking at IEPs and looking at the students' language abilities doesn't just inform you about the scaffolds that you might need, but it also informs you about what your students are bringing into the classroom and what they are able to do. So in IEPs, I see that constantly you have student X will be able to reach 80% of the target 3 out of 4 tries. And so I think that that's when we also need to consider that just because a student fails an assignment once doesn't mean that we don't re-allow them to do it, because it's stated in their IEPs. And so the same with our international students, giving them the opportunity to redo assignments, and that just ties into mastery, right? If a student doesn't accomplish a task week 1, it doesn't mean that we should limit them and not let them do it week 8, right? And so just thinking about moving on forward with mastery and how we can let students show mastery throughout the semester by maybe a scaffold, it benefits them. And so if it's another IEP, I think that it's important that we learn those those specific needs so that we can support them to accomplish those goals.
So also I use student language ability to differentiate my instructions. So for all the activities that I do, I would allow them to use pictures, diagrams to explain what they are doing. So just like, for example, in science, if we do CERs, instead of the evidences where they will be talking, I allow them to get some pictures to illustrate what they mean, and then give a brief description of the picture. And then for apes, I also do that. So the evidences that they could give will be some pictures that they think are related to what they want to say, and then just describe the picture.
I really appreciate not only what the panelists are saying, but what teachers are saying in the chat as well. They're echoing and affirming a lot of the things they hear among the teachers and also adding some of their own. I really appreciate that. We can go two ways based on that last response. I heard we naturally slipped into talking about assessment. I heard there's a lot of talk about, mastery grading. That's a topic I want to get to, but I also heard about interventions that you're using as part of your planning. So let's start with the intervention piece. What are some interventions that you've utilized and successfully that have supported you as an instructor and have been supported your students, either your international students or your students with IEPs? What are some other, you named some already, but what are some other in-class or after-school intervention strategies or techniques that you would recommend to your peers?
I'll go. I think that I really try to make sure that I don't teach the full 70 minutes so that afterwards we have time. And I ask the students ahead of time, the ones that are actively trying to get these problems done. And I asked them if they could stay oh, just give me 5 minutes after class. And, either they'll share their screen or I'll continue sharing mine and I'll pull up. Luckily for math, we're using Desmos and I could see their work. So I'll pull up their problem. They'll stay after and we'll kind of walk them through that and then provide more examples after. I'll stop doing Desmos. I'll pull up a whiteboard and we'll practice some more problems like that. But that way it's more focused. A couple of the students, other students will stay on, even though I'm you guys don't have to, stay, you guys can go. But it seemed like we kind of had started a little tutoring session, a little trend afterwards, because it started with me trying to just help support my EL students to stay on so I can kind of really explain it to them, again, what we were trying to do and, explain it to them in Spanish. But yeah, it's just been helpful, to have those last 30 minutes and we'll get through, and then they're able to finish the problem and they always seem happy about it. Oh, gracias, miss, gracias. Yeah. So they're getting their work done, and it's just been great to just kind of leave that time to keep them on and they're willing to stay usually.
For us, breakout rooms have been really useful, breaking students down into heterogeneous groups. So that means that we just don't have SPED students in one room. We have students that need the extra support in our general ed population and our SPED students as well in heterogeneous breakout rooms. And so we either try to slow down instruction in those breakout rooms or we try to advance students. So it's all about breakout rooms and how to utilize them. I think we all learned how to use them effectively throughout remote learning. And so breakout rooms became really useful for us in our instruction because we also found that students who were reluctant to speak and ask for help in the general or the large room were more inclined to ask for support or speak out when they were in a small breakout room. And so that's one thing that we were doing a lot in our classes to support our students who might need the additional support and the guidance.
I want to piggyback on what Ms. Cano said, sorry. We use breakout rooms as well. Sometimes it's heterogeneous, sometimes it's just by individualized instruction, depending on what areas, they might not be able to understand. And I know sometimes when I hear this from the teachers, but I am a little spoiled because I do have other adults with me as well. It's not just Ms. Garcia, we also have the SPED paraprofessional and we also have City here. So I'm able to, kind of use that to my advantage and kind of even do smaller breakout groups by, areas of either they're not doing well on the lesson or they haven't done cool downs or they haven't done whatever area they might need. So that's also helpful, of course, to be able to use the breakout rooms for that.
So I really agree that breakout rooms are very important to the international students. To some point that towards these 2 months, they already are the ones asking that they will go on breakout rooms.
Thank you. Mr. Molina put a little comment in the chat a minute ago complimenting one of our panelists on her ability to bring joy to the kids. And I guess that leads me into a question that we all struggle with all our students. But especially looking at these last critical 3 weeks of school, I'm wondering about engagement and motivation. Have you discovered, are you discovering tips and strategies, techniques, tools to keep our students engaged, to keep our students motivated? And again, I have the focus today is especially on our students with IEPs and our international students. What tools or strategies can you share with each other and share with the audience that have been successful for you and that you're still going to lean on these weeks to come?
I'll go. This is like all across the board, and I know this is not news to anybody, but like just, our students need to feel safe and the spaces and the environments that they're in and with the people that they're around. So like I think that just really taking the time to at the beginning of class with our check-ins and stuff, like it's honestly been the driving force in my class to get the work done. We do discussions on daily discussion boards on Schoology, and they're worth 3 points, whether they just have to respond, and they're not math related. One of the most popular topics is food. So, and then we'll talk about it. Like I'll read their responses as we're on Zoom. I'm sharing my screen, and they'll continue to engage in the chat, and I translate it as well. It's in English and in Spanish, and so they can respond in English or Spanish. I let them know that, and we kind of just like we're talking and hanging out while students are getting there and just getting to know each other. So I learned that my students love talking about food, and I don't know, it's just been, we have fun, and I don't know, they've made fun of me. They've, like on stuff that I've shared about myself, they get to know you. So it's just, then after that, I'm like, all right, guys, let's get some math done. Let's do some math. And then, chat's blowing up after that, and they're doing math, and they're like, it's like, super engaged. It's not always like that though. I'll say that, there's been days where they're just not feeling it. So, but that's normal. But yeah, that was what I've been doing.
I
What I
agree
think-
with you, Miss. I
Go
agree
ahead.
with you, Miss Guzman. We always start our class with a check-in question, whether it's like a mood meter or a hypothetical question. But what Mr. Prado and I also do as well is, during the lesson, we will have maybe 4 students lined up, like, okay, Marie, Jane, John, and Johnny, you guys are up next. If you don't mind, unmuting yourselves or sharing the chat, we will ask you to respond or, a question or two in the next couple of minutes. So they have that heads up that they might, that they will be called on. It's not a surprise one.
So I agree with everybody else that intentional and explicit waiving of SEL in the lessons usually help to motivate students. Also for students who are not participating, and there are lots of them, like they are in the Zoom, but they are not responding or they are not even listening. So what we do usually with my TA is to alternate giving them direct messages in the chat, and then just saying, hello, how are you? How do you think you could participate today? And if you are going to say that to them individually, they will say, okay, I will. Then that brings them into the discussion.
I think just to echo what everybody's saying is incorporating SEL. And sometimes we ask, how are you feeling? Sometimes we ask questions that are relevant to food or culture, responsive questions. But also I think what worked for us is that we don't start class right away. We have music, and so we have a little timer where students can come in and adjust, to the class change. Because before, when we were completely remote, we didn't have much of a time frame to switch classes into. And so that really, I think, set a relaxed tone in the classroom for us. And so always, after those check-ins, always checking in on those students that might have said that they don't feel well, but it just doesn't work for, it's for everyone. So we found that it was beneficial to do that check-in. And I think that's one of the things that I will for sure take into my practice when we return completely, I hope, because we typically start with a warm-up, and then I realized that it was extremely important to ask how the students are doing to get a feel of the classroom. And sometimes those conversations might go beyond the check-in, and I learned that that's totally fine, because some of my students needed that at that moment. So being okay with adjusting your lesson is extremely important, because I think that it's important that we take into consideration how our students feel. And for some of our students, they had so many struggles that they were going through, and this was a place for them to be able to vent.
I have a question regarding you guys doing your music and your check-in and all that. I'm just curious, like, do you guys have like a certain time, like 5 minutes? It has to be 5 minutes. That's it. That's all. No ifs, ands, and buts. Or are you guys a little bit flexible when it comes to that? I'm just curious because of an observation that I did have. And, I went a little bit over the time with the check-in and the music and stuff like that. So I'm just wondering, like, what are your thoughts on, the timing from the time that they're coming into the class, the check-in, the music playing, and all that good stuff? For those of you that were talking about the check-in, like Miss Guzman, Miss Kano, what is your, flexibility or non-flexibility? Okay.
Yeah, I try to just take 10 minutes with the check-in, but we've gone over, and it depends, like how Ms. Kano shared, like sometimes they needed that. And so I'm like, it's totally fine. It feels a little like, oh shoot, in that moment you're like, damn, we only have a little bit of time. But I'm like, you know what, it doesn't matter. Like, yeah, like they needed that. And you could tell how engaged they were with that conversation. So you just have to be, yeah, flexible and just it is what it is. With the music piece, I kind of have it playing in the background, but for math, like there's moments where I'm like, okay, you guys, I'm consistently using a timer where they're doing the work on their own. Like 3 minutes here, or 2.5 is my favorite time, but 3, whatever. And so I'll play the music and I'm not talking during that time, and it's just playing while they're working.
So does that extend your instruction time, or do you still stay within the time frame of instruction?
I still stay within the time frame because I'm letting the music play while they're doing the work. Like, and then once those 3 minutes are up, I, like lower the music a little bit. We go over that problem. I just, I'm talking about the next activity. And then, then they're working on their own again. And then we come back and we're like back and forth a lot. But, I lower it, the volume, bring it back up when I'm not talking anymore as they're working.
In terms of the timer piece with music, so I found it interesting for the students to have timers with in different languages. So I use Spanish the first day, then English, and then we have different languages, and they love it.
Thank you. And again, thanks in the chat as well, the teachers putting in their own answers to these questions and their own strategies. I really appreciate that. So I think this is my hardest question, the most difficult question. Without a doubt this year, without a doubt, the challenges of designing curriculum, probably the most difficult of your careers, the challenges of instruction, the most difficult of your careers. And now we get to that point, it's the challenge of assessment. The grading window is open for all students. Seniors have got a week and everyone else has got a little more. What tips, what strategies, what advice can you give the rest of us in terms of solutions to the dilemmas of assessment during this pandemic, during distance learning? Again, thinking specifically for international students and students with IEPs.
I feel that to help them in the assessment, I have to model what I expect. So when I give a project or any activity that they do, like CERs, like this is the project, I give them a sample that shows what I expect from them. And from there, they understand that this component should be there, this component should be there. And they try to put all this information as much as they can. So giving samples to show what is expected of them to produce is, I think, a very important one.
I know for us in Algebra 1, we have cool downs that are done at the end of the lesson. And then we provide the students multiple attempts for the cool downs. And there's a feature in Schoology where you could give them feedback on specific problems that they miss. And we provide them feedback and we remind the students to go back and look at it. And, we try to give them like hints, like what they did wrong, because sometimes they're just off by like a little bit. And then, we have them use that feedback so that they could take it a second attempt. And if not, maybe even a third attempt or even a fourth attempt if they need to. So that way they can, continue to, I know Ms. Cano mentioned this earlier, master that concept that we want them to master. So as long as they're trying and, giving them the maximum effort, and that's what we want from our students.
I think using exemplars have been very beneficial. My POC, we created exemplars of what we expected in big projects and also in the assessments. And like Ms. Guzman just shared, assessments aren't a secret. I purposely tell students like, hey, this is gonna be on the test, or this is, please make sure you're looking at this because you're going to see it again. And just being very transparent about what the expectations are, but also if a student does wish to redo a test, giving them the opportunity to redo it. Maybe the questions might be different, but the concepts are the same, so that they have that opportunity to show that they were able to understand or what they know, right? Because sometimes, especially during remote, you have a lot of factors that might contribute to them not doing so well. Maybe they're taking care of a sibling or they have a lot of noise going on at home. And so taking that into consideration and some of the settings that our students are in, it's very important right now because they might not be the best. And so I have students who are taking care of younger siblings and they can't do an assessment. When I say you should do it, doesn't mean that they can't do it. I have students who have to cook lunch for their 5-year-old sibling and hey, we have an assessment, but I usually let students do assessments at any time. So just being open and flexible about when they can do the assessments, and also not necessarily putting a 0 because they weren't able to do it when I expected it to be done. I think it's very important, in particular during remote.
All right. Guys, I want to ask you one more question, and I don't want to, I guess if you could put it in a nutshell, if you could distill it all down to one piece of advice to each other on the panel, or one piece of advice to the audience here listening, what's one piece of advice you'd give your colleagues to help them support their international students and or their students with IEPs to the finish line this semester?
I'll go ahead. For me, would just be, to everyone that's attending this video, or even the people that are not here, just continue to do what you're doing. We're all trying to, do what we can for our students. That's what we do. And that's all I can say on that.
For me, I'm sure all teachers here at Santee are doing their best to support all our students, to have equal access to the curriculum. But just be flexible and just hold their hands, like Miss DJ said, to the finish line, I guess.
I would just say, don't be afraid to lose that instructional time around with content. Like it really goes a long way to just you know, share stuff about yourself, get to know your students. Even though there's only a couple of weeks left, you could still, you know, build relationships even in these last couple of weeks.
I would add, of course, tutorings, more invitations for them to attend tutorings and office hours, emailing them to come, and yeah, motivating them to join you in one-on-one discussions in order for them to be able to make up some work.
I think just being patient, being flexible, and being supportive and caring, building relationships is extremely important. And I think it goes for everyone. You know, if you don't have a welcoming environment, just like we might be reluctant as adults, our students will also be reluctant to share. And so it's important to provide that space where they feel safe, just like Ms. Guzman shared earlier. And also giving students options. You know, I think as an English teacher, I think, you know, sometimes we feel that writing is how students show mastery of a concept or skill, but I've become more flexible in terms of giving students choice and also allowing students to record responses, just because I didn't do it as a kid, but you know, we're moving into providing student access, and so I allow my students to record responses, and so that's been pretty cool. Just being flexible, giving students choice. It's important because it's not your classroom, it's our classroom, like I always tell my kids, and acknowledging what they bring into the classroom, and also acknowledging how you as an educator can improve is important. So as a teacher, reflection is extremely important all the time.
Thank you, guys. I want to close with one last question. And this is a good chance for those of you in the audience as well to put if you have any burning questions of your own, go ahead and put them in the chat. I see that one, Miss Gray. That's a good question. So feel free to answer that question as we approach finals. Again, teachers, and you'll be hearing more about this. I can partially answer that, Miss Gray. Finals are not mandatory. You should know that, first of all. Same rules as first semester. So you certainly have flexibility as teachers with how you approach the week ahead. I'm going to let the panelists answer that as well. But I do want to ask the panelists, you've been identified to speak today because you showed success in these difficult tasks supporting students. So what supports do you need? And speak for yourself and speak for your colleagues. What supports have you received or do you need to best support your students that we as an admin and we as a collegial staff can work to spread and multiply for this summer and for this fall?
For myself, I would be requesting like TAs for all my classes with international students, because I have a TA, but she is only attending my period 2 and period 4 and period 6. I don't have any TA for the other classes, and I have lots of international students there too.
I believe a common planning period is important. It's extremely important. I find that there's so much benefit from being able to meet with my PLC, but also with my co-teacher. So a common planning period is extremely important in order to be a successful team and to be able to discuss what strategies and scaffolds our students might need. Our study, you know, our international students and SPED students are our most vulnerable populations, and too many times we don't really prepare to engage them in what we're teaching. And so I think that the common planning period it's great. I benefited from having a common period with my co-teacher, but also with my PLC, and just working around little road bumps that we might foresee has been extremely beneficial.
I was gonna piggyback again on Ms. Cano on the PLC portion, because it's been helpful, you know, being able to plan and look at the lessons, work with my colleagues and figure out different strategies that we can use. And even sometimes disagree on what we think we should do, but it's helpful because then we can kind of talk about it and we don't just dismiss each other. We kind of figure out a way to, you know what, let's see your idea, my idea, and see how we can incorporate it and see what works and what doesn't work. And even at the end, we can, it's still our class. So if we want to, I could disagree with Mr. Carreño, but, I'll do what I want to do. But, I'll get that feedback from him or from Ms. DJ or from Ms. Damien, even from Ms. Garcia, but it's helpful.
I'll just say sometimes I know with our EL students, it's not perfect. We have, just because I'm on this panel, I don't have it figured out. I struggle with my fourth period still. And I feel that's what the period that I have the most international students in that class. And so maybe just more support about who can we talk to that could reach out to them, letting us know just more information of how to get a hold of some of these students. Because it's just that I think that's just what's been a struggle with maybe more help, because then I don't know, we have a lot of other things that we gotta finish planning, doing, etc. And sometimes you don't make those calls, or you can't, you try to find time for it, blah blah blah, but or they don't answer. So I don't actually really know who do I contact, right? Maybe just more information around that.
I appreciate you guys. I appreciate your thoughts, the audience, the comments from the audience. I want to invite Ms. Ruiz to say a quick word or two before we wrap this up this morning.
I want to thank everyone for being reflective in both the chat and speaking up and supporting one another. I think that shows that as Santee, as a community, we work with one another, we support one another. And this year, although we were apart, it brought a lot of teams closer together because they really relied on one another. I know teams were meeting at 7 o'clock on the weekends at every single time, just to plan and to best support our students and our staff. And we can definitely see that when we enter your classrooms. We can feel the welcomeness based on your activities, and the relationships are very evident. Some of our kids came back because of you, not because of school. They came back because of you. So thank you, everyone. And I look forward to continuing to learn more things like lo-fi and everything else that I take from you, so that I can incorporate it in my homeroom class.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you, audience. Teachers, audience, if you enjoyed this, let your administrator know. We put this on because you guys loved it in February. So if this was also useful, it can be one of those practices we continue next year to continue to offer teacher perspective and teacher voice throughout the year. Have a blessed Friday, everybody, and a wonderful weekend if I don't see you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having this. You guys have a good weekend.
You too.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Good.